Good morning and welcome to the Daily Halacha. The Daily Halacha is sponsored by the Morgan family in memory of Bella's mother, Dr. Ellen Shanzer of blessed memory, Elana Bat Yisrael. We have been discussing the laws of Bishul Akum, and now we're up to a situation if there was an elderly person who was unable to cook for themselves and they have a non-Jewish housekeeper who cooks the food. How do we contend with the issues of Bishul Akum, of the prohibition of eating food cooked by a Gentile? So there is a very interesting halacha regarding a sick person who needs food on Shabbat, even though they are not deathly ill, but they are sick and they need food for Shabbat to be cooked for them from scratch. The halacha is that one is allowed to ask a Gentile to cook for them on Shabbos, and that is because the prohibition of asking a Gentile to cook for someone on Shabbos is midirabbanan, is a rabbinic prohibition, and because of a sick person, the rabbis relaxed some of those prohibitions, including this one, which would normally prohibit one to ask a Gentile to cook for them on Shabbos. How does this relate to our issue of Bishul Akum? Well, we have a situation where you have an elderly person who lives alone, and the only person who can cook for them is a Gentile. So even though generally speaking, the prohibition of having the Gentile cook on Shabbat is only for Shabbat, and it also would mean that the Gentile is cooking the food. But once the rabbis allowed this elderly person to eat the food cooked by the Gentile on Shabbat, they also relaxed the prohibition of Bishul Akum, when the food was cooked for the elderly person on Shabbat. And in an absolute desperate situation where there's no one else to prepare the food, some suggest that this would also be allowed, meaning asking the non-Jewish housekeeper to cook for the elderly person, even though, generally speaking, we would not eat food cooked by a non-Jew. We could add to that the other leniency which we mentioned, that if someone is cooking for a Jew in the Jew's home, and the person works for the Jew, that according to some authorities, the prohibition of Bishul Akum does not apply. So if you put all these things together, in an absolutely desperate situation, it would be permitted. But certainly in a situation where there's an elderly person living with a non-Jewish housekeeper or non-Jewish health caregiver, in that situation, it was really incumbent upon the Jewish members of this elderly person's family to prepare meals for them and to store them in the refrigerator or the freezer, and to have the non-Jewish person heat them or warm them for the Jewish person rather than cook them from scratch. Also, depending on what type of oven or stove one has, the Jewish family can leave a candle burning in the home safely, of course, and the non-Jew can light the fire on the oven from the candle. That would also be allowed in a situation like this, even though that's something we normally do not like to rely on. So there are a number of different ways to deal with the issue of an elderly person living alone with only non-Jewish help. Again, of course, ideally, it would be proper for the Jewish family members to make sure there's prepared food that only needs to be warmed up for the elderly person. Sometimes that's not possible. The person lives out of town, far away, has special dietary needs. In such a case, the instructions that I suggested are the way to go. Have a wonderful day.